Welcome to another episode of The Unseen Paranormal, where some of the scariest things are unseen. I'm your host, Eric Freeman. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Unseen Paranormal. Today we're chatting with Miranda Young of Ghost Biker Explorations and Dr. Sumner with Soul Sisters Paranormal. These two ladies have teamed up to form History, Highways, and Haunts, LLC, and now are the custodians of the historic Scott County Jail in Huntsville, Tennessee. They have been working on putting together a museum and now host history and paranormal tours of the beautiful jail, as well as paranormal investigations. Today, we're going to chat with them both about how they started this venture and the history and hauntings of historic Scott County Jail. You can find more information on the tours and investigations at historicscottcojail.com or find them over on Facebook. Hey, Miranda. Hey, Dr. Chris. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us, Eric.
Hey, Eric.
So, like I said, y'all are operating the historic Scott County Jail now, which I had the pleasure, and thank y'all for having us a few nights ago. And we were actually just talking before recording about a lot of the evidence, which I'll have posted up online here soon. But so how did y'all get into even finding the jail and get into doing this venture to begin with?
Well, it actually started, Miranda and I, as you mentioned at the intro, we have our separate paranormal investigation teams, and she and I met about 3 years ago and became fast friends. And we had always kicked around the idea of wanting to open a museum for historic preservation purposes, but also as a research center for paranormal investigators. And it just so happens that this jail in Huntsville, Tennessee, it's been sitting vacant since it closed in 2008, and it's in Scott County, which is where Miranda is from.
Yeah, and I mean that jail's just always been a fixture there as long as I've been alive, and I've always been fascinated with it. And so I knew it had been vacant. I wasn't sure what the intentions were, and so in talking to a friend there in my hometown, found out that at the time it was still vacant. At the same time that Dr. Sumner and I were creating our company. And so I thought, what better place than to set up this research center and museum than the jail. And so Dr. Sumner and I sat down and we formed a plan, a business plan, if you will, and reached out to the mayor. And he was very happy to speak with us, invited us to speak to the local alderman. And it essentially was a hands down vote, unanimous between all of them as far as setting up this research center and museum.
Yeah, so we opened in September of last year, and it's just been a whirlwind type of a situation so far, but it's one that we've greatly enjoyed. And, we've got to meet amazing people, amazing paranormal investigators have come in and investigated, such as yourself. And it solidifies in our minds that, there is something unexplained going on in this little jail.
Yeah, and it's been a great learning experience, too, as far as doing this as a business. Dr. Sumner's got great business sense and a business and criminal justice background. And then my background is in marketing and design. And so it really was just a natural fit. And so far we've been open for 9 months now. And it's really been cool to watch this whole thing grow into the historic museum, but then to also learn from the different teams that come in and do investigations there at the location.
Yeah, and I've talked to both of y'all on the show before independently about what y'all do separately, but I think we're all of the same mind that we're all very much into the history as much as the paranormal. And so it's pretty awesome to go to a place like this. And I can understand, Miranda, too, why you've been so fascinated with the place from being from there, because it's such a awesome building. It's all stone. And for anybody that hasn't seen it, go check out the pictures on the website or on Facebook, because it's all made of stone and it kind of looks like a castle.
Yeah. And, it's been interesting because that's something that we have captured through EVPs as well as different folks who have come to investigate there. We get castle a lot. And so to have a castle sitting here in the middle of East Tennessee, it's pretty phenomenal. And, I can remember, going to the library as a kid, because the library is right there in the square across from the jail, and seeing the prisoners inside there, looking out the windows and really just looking at the building and being very intrigued just by the architecture of it, but also just wondering what it was like inside.
And to your point earlier, Eric, the history is really what we wanted to capture with this venture. If you go to our website, it's the history that you see first, the history of the building, the history of the county, and then we bring in the paranormal aspect, really kind of underneath that umbrella of the historical component. And so that's really the essence of what we wanted to do. And, as Miranda said, her background is in marketing, and she's done a masterful job of actually bringing that to life. Because like I said, we had this vision of letting the history essentially drive this train, if you will, and then the paranormal coming in underneath that umbrella. And I think we've done it with great success so far.
Yeah, and thank you for your compliments. It's something we definitely wanted that to be the driver with it, and we always say it's essentially the history, the true crime nature, and then the paranormal has always been sort of third. But every person that comes in pretty much asks us, do you have resident spirits? Is this place haunted? So it's really interesting the interest that's in the paranormal side of it from just the people who are history buffs that come in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so let's get into the history. The place was built in 1904, and like you said earlier, it operated until 2008. So it's had over 100-year history as a jail. So it's had a long sordid history as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So correct. It was built in 1904. It was in operation until 2008. And it has a long history of different events that happened there. For example, in 1925, Sheriff R.D. Ellis was killed outside that jail. His body was taken inside the jail for burial. We've had children being born in the jail. We've had lynchings where mobs have broken through the front door and taken inmates out and hung them in nearby trees. And so it really does run the gamut from essentially being a place where life happened, i.e. the jailers and their family lived there, to actually death occurring inside the jail as well. So it really does run that gamut. And then in 2008, due to fire marshal regulations and fire code violations, the jail was closed to inmates. And it really sat vacant until 2017 when the town of Huntsville acquired it from Scott County. They did get a tourism grant, which allowed them to put in new windows, a heating and cooling system, and do a repaint. And then after 2017, it sat vacant again until last year, 2021, when Miranda and I actually acquired it for this venture.
Yeah, and some of those, it's crazy how many lynchings there were. When I was there, y'all have this awesome timeline that y'all have put up on the wall that y'all have done the research on to get all these different points throughout the history of the jail. And it would just amaze me that how many lynchings they had where mobs of people came in. And this wasn't justice. This was like, vigilante justice with these mobs of people coming in masks or hoods and taking these people out and just hanging them before they ever got a trial.
Yeah, absolutely. There have been 7 total that we have record of here at the jail, and only one of those 7 was actually executed by the state, and he was a former deputy who did work there at the jail. The rest of them, like you said, they were all taken out via mountain mob justice, and we're slowly but surely finding stories about each of these. The county was established there in 1849. And so not just with the jail, but also with the entire county, there's just such an interesting history. And so it was important for us to be able to really have a place to showcase the history from when the county started with those significant events to when the jail was built, and then all the different events that had happened within up until we acquired the jail in 2021. So we're really proud of that timeline, and really proud to be able to showcase all of that interesting history there.
And also in the museum area downstairs, which was the jailer's quarters at one time, y'all have kind of built a museum in there, and y'all have all kinds of stuff that could be paranormal trigger objects. You've got a whole case full of shivs that are made out of toothbrushes and plastic and all manner of things, and some of them actually came from the jail.
Correct. Yeah. And that, again, that's really what we wanted to do and it's surprising when folks from the county come in. I think they're expecting just to see the jail, just to tour the jail. But almost every single one has been surprised at the amount of artifacts, at the amount of stories that we have there, the amount of displays that we have for the general public to come in and see. And so to your point, that first museum room there, when you first walk into the door on the left, that's really kind of what we wanted to showcase right off the bat. bat, right? We wanted to highlight the crime in Scott County, which those folks did crime really well there in Scott County, and then the law enforcement side as well. So we have tributes to deputies. We have tributes to Arzo Carson, who's the longest serving director of the TBI, and just different stories to kind of humanize the law enforcement side and also the inmate side, right? To your point, we do have shanks and shivs, but we also have artwork and wooden items that they created while they were inmates as well.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about the whole thing as well is that the jail has such a rich history with most people who live in the county, because either somebody had, you could talk to anybody there in the county and they've either had family who served as a jailer, a sheriff who served time in the jail. So there's all kinds of connections just within the county. And when we have locals who come in, and some are not even locals, they come in and they talk about, they're pointing out their family members on the timeline, or they're looking for the cell that their uncle stayed in or whatever. It's really interesting to hear that because there is such a strong connection with the community. Like I said, even some of the tourists from out of town that come in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to kind of fill in some of those blanks about maybe people that you didn't even know about. And maybe they have a fascinating story, but you can't, it's not in newspapers or anything like that. But to fill in some of those blanks too, it's pretty neat to have people come in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And to Miranda's point, we have numerous people on a weekly basis that come in and say, okay, my uncle lived here, or my uncle was in this cell or this area of the jail, and he was in here for this, but he was really a great guy, and just really tell their story. And it's really interesting to hear those stories, from inmates and jailers and such. And it has been an interesting journey so far.
Yeah, and slowly but surely, in the very beginning, we had quite a few people come to us, and they were putting items on loan or donating items and then sharing their stories. And then there was kind of a little bit of a lull, but slowly and surely as time has gone on, we've had more people where they see other people sharing their stories. They've been coming to us and sharing photographs, sharing stories and stuff. And so those are becoming exhibits within the museum that we're adding pretty much on a weekly basis. We're adding different items, different stories.
Yeah, and I want the listeners to know that y'all, like I was talking about the shivs and stuff, but y'all are doing just as much in the museum part for the law enforcement side as well, because y'all are collecting patches from different departments if they want to donate a patch to put on the wall, and just, kind of crime and policing in general, not just the jail inmate side.
Yeah, in our law enforcement appreciation room, we definitely were collecting patches, and we have our address out there. If anyone wants to send a patch from their agency, we definitely welcome that and are honored to put it up on our wall. We keep track of the unfortunate end of the line deaths each year. And then also on the other wall, we've got kind of a tribute to our law enforcement officers. We've had 14 local ones that have had an end of watch. And so we're trying to put their stories up there as well, just to really show the other side of things. And we're working on getting that up as well.
And you had mentioned that y'all have also had births in the history of the jail. And there were also women housed in the jail as well.
Correct. Yeah. So the one birth that we know of was to the Sheriff Lloyd. He and his wife had a daughter there, Ella Lloyd. She was born inside the jail and really kind of grew up for her first couple of years. She grew up in that jail. And yes, there was women inmates there as well. And to Miranda's point earlier, it was almost a community building, right? So the jailer's wife would cook for the inmates and cook for the deputies, but the kids of the jailers would play in the jail, and their friends would play in the jail. And so that's an interesting dynamic in and of itself. But then when you add female inmates to the general population of inmates at the jail, it does add kind of a different take, a different dynamic on the inmate population.
Yeah, and y'all told us about one interesting thing about the women's cell that they had to do with the ceiling.
Yeah, so actually it was on the day of our grand opening. One of the county mayor, he had come in and he was sharing the story. He said, I don't know if you were aware of this or not. He said, but if you go and you look at the women's cell up there on the third floor in maximum security, you'll see that it's been extra reinforced. And he said, told about this because I was asking about it, and I was told that they actually had to do that because at one point in time the women had become a little innovative and found themselves pushing the roof up on that section and coming through and then going to the male's side on the other side of the maximum security area.
Yeah, so when you go in the jail, you can tell because there's these metal like slats that run across the ceiling that aren't in any other cells. The other thing I found interesting about the women's cells, because in the men's cells, the toilet's just out there for everybody to see you do your business. In the women's cells, they actually have like a little stall where they get some privacy.
They do. Obviously, women have different needs than men do. So that was the reason why that was there. Now, on the trustee levels, obviously the bathrooms, they had an independent door, because the trustees had a little bit more privilege and different accommodations than those up in maximum security. But to your point, yes, the women did have a division for their restroom there in their cell.
Yeah, and that cell was at one time also used as a trustee cell on the maximum security side. So I guess, I don't know which came first. I don't know if it was given the privacy for women or given the privacy as a little bit more of a privilege as a trustee cell. But it's definitely much different than the others.
Yeah, it was. And when we first walked in there, we talked about it because y'all were giving us kind of a history tour before we went lights out and started investigating. But whenever we took a break before we came back in and investigated, and we were all talking about it. We were all guys that were investigating the other night. There were 5 of us, and that cell felt heavier to all of us than any of the other cells. It felt crowded when we walked in there. It's kind of how I felt. Like I was just needed to, tuck my shoulders in because it felt crowded.
And that's interesting. And we've had other groups of all male investigators say the same thing in that cell, and also the cell on the second floor that at one point served as a women's cell also. In fact, we had a friend of ours who's a paranormal investigator. He and his wife came to our grand opening event in September. And when he walked into the second floor women's cell, he said something actually grabbed him by the shoulder and spun him around. And so it's interesting that the spirits of the women seem to really connect with the men or the all male teams that go in there. We've had several that have captured women's voices or a woman's voice on EVPs, and they do have a different feeling when they walk into those cells.
Yeah, and also there's still some in different places of the jail you have graffiti, and there's some in the women's cell that's pretty interesting. And I like how y'all have kind of tried to preserve some of that because if I remember correctly, you said that when they got the grant, the city got the grant to kind of redo the jail. They went in and painted over most of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, because at the time they didn't know exactly what they were going to do with the building, but the intention was to potentially have school groups and such come in, and apparently some of the graffiti was a little more crude and crass, and so they believed that they were going to go ahead and paint over it. Thankfully, before they did that, right when they got the grant, they did have someone come in and take some photos of some of the graffiti. The more mild and benign graffiti is what they left. They left some of it that had more of a religious feel. And then also in the women's cell, there's some pretty cool art inside of the women's cell there. And so like to find out a little more information about maybe when that was drawn. But they did. And so we've tried to go in and put pictures up of what some of it looked like. Yeah, I know Dr. Sumner and I wish it was still there because it has a whole story in and of itself, but we do understand why they did feel they needed to do that.
Yeah, it makes sense. As an investigator coming in, we used it as a trigger object, just reading some of the stuff that the people have written and seeing if we got any kind of response from it. And it's just kind of something else to add to your investigation.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great trigger item. We haven't had anybody do that before. We have had teams read some of the newspaper articles that we have that are hung up in each of the cells, and those seem to absolutely be a trigger item. We've had teams that will start to read them, and they get the words before they even get to the word in the article. They receive that word on the ovilus, and things that are on the wall definitely seem to be a trigger item, whether it be the graffiti, as you mentioned, or reading the articles on the wall. We've had investigators that will start reading the newspaper articles that we have hung in different cells, and they'll actually get either through the ovilus or through audible EVPs, they'll actually get those words read to them in advance. So it's actually reading the things that we have around there is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, and we've had teams come and say that they've spent time reading the articles, and even if by some chance that it didn't trigger something, at least audibly that they heard, they've always left saying they were fascinated by the articles that they were reading. So, and then they come to find out after they go back to review evidence, they find other things that maybe they didn't hear in the moment.
Yeah, I've been in other jails, and the Scott County Jail was definitely a unique experience with that, with y'all having the articles on the walls and stuff. But to have like those exhibits and things hanging on the wall that you can use as trigger objects and just add to your investigation and kind of relate more to some of the spirits that may be there.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, the jail was built for 50 people, but at times it was very overcrowded.
Yeah, overcrowding was a problem there for sure. The jail, it only closed down at one point, and that was in the mid-'60s. And so it closed down for a very short period of time. They built a new jail there in the square, and they had so many escapes that they ended up bringing the inmates back to the jail, and they stayed there up until 2008 when it closed. So with the overcrowding, that just causes problems in and of itself and can cause some different violence and such. So it was built 50 inmates to one jailer, but they could have upwards of 100, maybe just a little bit more than that in some of the times of extreme overcrowding.
During the history of the jail, did they have any escapes from the actual jail there? I know you said the other one, they had some escapes.
Yeah, they actually had one escape that we know of, and it was actually two guys at the same time, and they escaped by crawling under the fence of the exercise yard that's out back behind the jail. And the story is, and we've heard this story from another inmate who was incarcerated with them at the same time. They escaped by climbing under the fence, and they were on the run for about 4.5 hours. And so everybody was called in to try to find these guys. And when they found them, they were soaking wet, and they were only about a half a mile from the jail. And so when they brought them back in, the other inmates were like, what happened? And they said, we don't know. We thought we had gotten so much further than we did because we crossed 3 rivers. And they actually ended up crossing the same river 3 times. So they just kind of made a big circle coming back around, and they were captured about a half mile from the jail. So it wasn't a long escape. They were brought back and reincarcerated. But yeah, that's the one story that we know of.
Yeah, and it's a very rough and rugged terrain there as well, right there behind the jail. We are not aware of any escapes that took place from actually inside the building, just there from the outside. But right in the back, it drops off. There's New River. It runs right in behind, and it's very mountainous and very rural there in the area.
Yeah, and when we were there, since we had all that rain, you could definitely hear it. It was raging. It's not a little trickling stream, that's for sure.
No. And we also think that is one of the reasons why we have such an active location. The jail itself is built of sandstone, which was locally mined in the area. And the sandstone bricks are 3 feet by 4 feet by 5 feet. So they're large sandstone bricks. And then we have that water element. And we just really think that maybe that enhances the spirit of the paranormal activity in the jail, since, the proximity to the water and then the element of just kind of holding that energy in the walls.
Yeah, good conductors for sure there.
Yeah, and also with having the walls so thick, I don't think we heard anything from outside. And I know, being in Huntsville, they kind of roll up the sidewalks, after 5 o'clock, so there's not many people out. But you really don't get a lot of traffic noise or anything at all from outside.
No, not really. The only drawback and sound you can get from there is we are located in the largest ATV adventure side-by-side riding area known as Brimstone. And so during the summer, when the side-by-sides and the razors and stuff come out, they do use the road that goes to the side of the jail that takes them back there to hit the trailhead. So every now and then you'll get some of that, but typically as it gets later, when investigations are going on, unless they're having an event, it's very quiet.
Yeah, I've just been to some places. Buchanan Log House in Nashville was horrible for EVPs and stuff. It's right by the airport, and with being an old log cabin, you could hear everything. And especially when you use, sensitive microphones and that type stuff. So it's nice to be in a place like that where it's kind of, really quiet. You don't have to worry about a dog barking outside.
Mm-hmm.
We never heard any of that all night.
Yeah. And like Miranda said, for the most part, it's like that. Just every now and then you have those one-off nights where something, could happen. But, generally speaking, it's pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing about the jail was that originally it was only 2 stories, right?
Correct.
And then they added the 3rd story. And then the 3rd story didn't have any windows. It just had bars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. So the original jail was built for 2 stories. And then in 1922, there was a fire. And instead of just repairing the fire damage, they decided to add the 3rd floor, which then became maximum security. And to your point, it was a very primitive jail up until about the 60s. It just had the bars on the windows. So the inmates were exposed to the harsh winters and the hot summers and the bugs and everything that comes with it. They did start installing just thin plexiglass or a plexiplastic over those to kind of stave off some of those elements. And then they added the actual windows that are there now. They added those with the tourism grant in 2017.
Yeah, so now any investigators that are listening that want to come investigate, it does have central heat and air. It is heated and cooled. It does have windows, so you don't have to worry about any of the elements or anything like that.
Right. But I mean, those lead to interesting stories in and of itself. So we've actually had people come in and say, when I was a kid, to earn some extra summer money, I would ride my bike back to behind the jail, and an inmate would throw down $10, and I'd go to the Jiffy and get cigarettes and a moon pie and ride back and throw it up to them. So it just, that it just kind of, again, lends to that interesting community jail story and historical timeline.
Yeah, with a small town community like that, like you were talking about, having people come in and say, my uncle was in here, but he wasn't a bad person or whatever. Mm-hmm. That kid riding his bike up there could have known somebody that was in the jail anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's such a small, close-knit community.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Yeah, we've had stories about when one of the last jailers' families lived there. He had several daughters, and they were tall basketball players, and so they actually had a basketball hoop set up outside where they would go and they would play and practice, and would talk about the inmates, coming to the windows and watching and throwing down money to get them to go and pick up cigarettes and such.
That's pretty. You don't hear stuff like that about jails normally.
No. Yeah, this one is definitely unique.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, it's an imposing building. And you were talking about the yard where they got to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine if I hadn't seen it for myself, I would think of like a modern jail or a prison with this huge yard. You could actually maybe park a Volkswagen Beetle inside this chain link fence.
Yeah. It's tiny. It's very tiny. I'd say maybe 15 feet by 10 feet, maybe a little bit larger, but it's not impressive.
No, and I can remember, like I said, as a kid going to the library, and they were just right there, and so I can remember looking over there and seeing 10, 15 inmates standing in that yard. The yard wasn't even actually added until, we don't have an exact date, but it was either the late 90s or right around early 2000 when the yard was actually added. And so, yeah, I can remember looking back there and seeing them outside and just kind of thinking that is so tight, so small, and just very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And then kind of, I guess, kind of like a zoo element, because they are right there in the middle of downtown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we use downtown, in air quotes.
Very loosely.
It's really interesting too, because we've heard stories, and this was something I remember as a kid. The prisoner parade. So we've had 4 different courthouses because one of them built or one of them burned, but essentially this courthouse that's there now, it's across the parking lot from the jail, and so there used to be a restaurant that sat right there beside of the library. And so on Wednesdays, which was court day, they would do the prisoner parade. And so if they had a court date, they would actually parade the prisoners from the jail and they would march them over to the court so that they could have their hearing and bring them back. And they would be led by armed guards, depending on how bad their crime was, depending on how many armed guards they had. So that was something people would sit at the restaurant and they would watch the prisoner parade.
Another interesting story when I asked you about it the other night, Miranda, was we kept 3 or 4 times, we quickly smelled the smell of weed, like weed smoke, like marijuana. And so I came down, Miranda was hanging out in the gift shop with the door closed while we were investigating, but I came in and asked her, has anybody ever reported smelling weed? And you told me an interesting story about how maybe that could factor into the paranormal stuff.
Yeah, so, they would actually, that was what a lot of the prisoners there in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s were put in that jail for, was actually for marijuana. And so it was nothing for them to go out and they would find the crops. And so they would bring them and they would store them in that first room, because at one time, while that room was used as a women's cell, it was also used as the closet where they kept the confiscated, weapons and pot and that sort of thing. Well, once that closet got full, they would take it over and they would burn the crops in the field next door. And so there was times that they would have huge crops that they would be burning. They would be so big that the paper would be there and take pictures of them burning the marijuana crops. And so some of the different stories that we've heard was when they would burn them, the smell would be so strong that the inmates would go over to that side of the jail and kind of hang out by the windows and get a contact high off of it. So it's something that wasn't uncommon to have that smell wafting through, just because they would burn so much over in that little grassy field right beside the jail. Yeah,
I thought it was crazy that we smelt it 3 or 4 times, and it was just a very quick smell. Like you get a nose full of it and then it's gone. And I walked around one time trying to smell it again and could never find it again.
Yeah. And that is something, because it was something that was so prevalent there in the county. And I can remember seeing the pictures in the paper and kind of laughing, because you would see the people kind of crowded around it with these big billowing smoke and fires going up. So that didn't surprise me when they said that the inmates used to do that.
Yeah, that's and since they didn't have any windows, there's just bars on the windows. Yeah, it's just billowing right in.
Exactly.
And speaking of newspapers, y'all had one cell blocked off because you got all these newspapers donated. And so y'all are continuing to dig through this stuff to find more history and more stuff to put up in the museum and around the jail.
Absolutely. So as Miranda said, we have a lot of people from the community who have really embraced what we've done and have been willing to donate different items. And so we have a gentleman who has really become one of our biggest patrons. And he came by one day and he said, I'm going to drop off a few newspapers. And we're like, oh, cool. So we walked out and Eric, he had over 1,000 newspapers in his Xterra, and then he came back with a second load. And so right now we've got almost 1,000 newspapers stuffed in one of our cells, because we've honestly got no place else to put them. So we are going to go through them, and they will become part of our exhibit. We're going to put them all around the walls on in the cell blocks on the second and third floor, and really make that part of the jail experience when you come in and tour for the history part of it.
Yeah, that one cell. Yeah, it's definitely full up of all those newspapers.
It's stuff.
Yeah. And it was interesting. We were looking at some of the newspapers on top, and in that cell we actually used that same cell. There's some graffiti written on the wall that we were reading off, and I don't know if we got any responses, but so we kind of used that cell too, but without even being able to get in it. But yeah, it was just crazy that all those newspapers and y'all have to try to dig through them and find stuff pertaining to the jail and crime. And
yeah, it's a real treasure. And, we've essentially started doing that with our weekly podcast that we do there from the jail. And, we have a segment there called A Day in History. And so we'll randomly go in, pick a paper, and then we'll read the headlines and talk about, the different stories from that particular day on a certain year. And it's interesting because pretty much, if I'm not mistaken, we've been doing this, this is our 4th week, and each one of those newspapers have had something about the jail or something about, new sheriff administration that's come on, that sort of thing. So it's been a cool way to try to go through it, but we're definitely going to have to buckle down, sit down. The goal is to categorize them and catalog them, and then start adding them to the exhibit.
And one of the things y'all have been doing with the history is each month, like this month, starting today, you're doing Women's History Month. Last month you did all month about different love stories and stuff within the jail for February and Valentine's Day.
Yeah. So each month we're going to have a theme. As you said before, last month was Fall in Love with History. And then we had our Crimes of Passion flashlight tours. And so that was actually a really big hit. We had a lot of people come in and take part in that and kind of embrace what we were doing. And so this month, to your point, it is International Women's Month. So we will be highlighting women this month in different crimes and just in historical context as well. So that's really kind of something that we thought would be kind of cool, a way to get people in and kind of seeing what we're doing with that.
Yeah, really trying to kind of change things up. I mean, you can set up a flashlight tour and go through and just do the history of the jail. And of course, that will change every month too, because we're constantly learning things. But just to keep it fresh and really try to encourage someone to say, hey, you came this month, we'll come next month, because we're also going to be sharing some different specific stories about some of the different crimes that we have up on our wall, as well as some of the history.
Yeah, and I like that you've started the video cast on your Facebook page talking about, because I'm a huge true crime nerd too, and so to talk about the crime part of it, because of course with the paranormal investigations and stuff, you're kind of steeped in a lot of the paranormal part of it, but yeah, to dive into the crime part of it and have guests on talking about different things, and yeah, I like that y'all decided to do that as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's one of those things that we're trying to appeal to all different facets of our audience. Again, whether you like just history, whether you like paranormal, true crime, anything like that, we really just want to offer a variety of news stories, of historical events, of different current events that we'll be having there at the jail also, and just really allowing people to kind of immerse themselves in what we're doing through all those different outlets.
Yeah, and it does a good job as far as really showing just how many different areas we can cover with this one location. We don't really, a lot of different locations, they kind of get pigeonholed or stuck just in that paranormal. But with this, it's so much more, and so we're really trying to cover that and really show that through our weekly live stream.
Yeah, and it's called the Jailhouse Informant Podcast, and every Monday night you're live on your Facebook page, right?
Yes.
Correct. At 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. Eastern time.
So everybody go check that out. It's really cool. I've watched a few of the episodes, and yeah, especially if you're into the true crime, and also if you're even not into the paranormal but want to kind of dabble a little bit, and you don't necessarily investigate, y'all do flashlight tours where you kind of get into the paranormal a little bit, but it's mostly history.
Mm-hmm. We do. And that's been actually a really big hit. We've, like, for example, this last weekend, we had just an amazing group of individuals from Knoxville, and they wanted to make it a complete night of it. So there was 3 couples, and they came down from Knoxville. They had dinner there in the town, and then came and did our flashlight tour. And to your point, we really do highlight the historical component of the jail, but we throw in a little ghost tour or ghost stories in there just to kind of tease them a little bit with our paranormal side, and everybody loves it. We've had people come back and do our public ghost hunts because they took our flashlight tours, and so it just kind of builds on itself, and it really just kind of keeps the interest alive in both the jail as a building and then also as a paranormal hotspot.
And y'all had a lady took some pictures and caught an amazing, she wasn't even there for paranormal, she was there for a flashlight tour, and she caught an amazing shadow figure.
Yeah, and that's, that's what we like to do with the flashlight tours and the public ghost hunts. With those, we kind of tell them a little bit. We don't go into a full paranormal 101, but we essentially talk to them about, okay, this is how your basic K2 works and the theory behind it. This is how you should take photos whenever you go on a paranormal investigation. So we encourage them to, we'll give them a K2 to carry around as we're sharing the stories. And a lot of the time we'll get interaction from our spirits whenever we're telling certain stories there. And then when we start getting that interaction, that's when they go and they start taking photos. And this particular time, we were getting some interaction down by our drunk tank. And so the lady snapped 3 pictures. And as she snapped the pictures, by the time she got to the third one, I mean, there's clearly something there. We've got it up on our site. And so the very next day, she sent a message and she's like, I think I may have caught something. And so when she sent it, we were blown away. Mm-hmm. And so I was down there in the room whenever she had taken it. So I knew about the environmental factors and knew where everyone was standing at that point. And I remember when she took the picture. So we knew about that, but we took and we ran the pictures through, our system that we have set up to sort of go in and test to see, if we can kind of debunk it and that sort of thing. And when we were running it through the test, you could see it even clearer as we went through the test procedure with it. So yeah, very, very, very cool capture. And we hope folks will go on to our page and check it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty neat. And for anybody listening that doesn't know, we generally take 3 pictures in a row, because a lot of times, like this lady, a lot of times you'll get a couple of pictures with nothing, but then you'll have one that has something different, or you'll have a shadow or something like that in the picture.
Mm-hmm. And it allows you to do that comparison, right? So if she would have just taken the third picture and we just saw this shadow figure there, yes, that's extremely telling. But when you have 2 shots instantaneously before that have nothing, and then on the third one, you get this amazing shadow figure. I mean, it's just so compelling when you see that. And so to your point, taking 3 pictures just allows you to have that comparison side by side of here's something, here's a picture where there's nothing, and then boom, all of a sudden, within the matter of a split second, we've got something appearing there.
Yeah, and another team that caught something pretty amazing that is on your Facebook page as well is my buddy Damien and Josh from RKB Paranormal. They actually caught a picture flying off the wall.
Yeah, that was definitely a dramatic night and a dramatic catch. But we were real impressed by that. And I was downstairs there. I was on site there in the gift shop whenever they captured. Of course, I had noise canceling headphones on, so I didn't hear all the commotion going on. But they had been coming down and kind of telling me a little bit of the things they had been capturing when they would take their break. And so after this picture falls off the wall, they come running down, and I mean they're sitting there rubbing their arms, and they look pretty pale at the moment, and they're like, Did you hear us scream? And I'm like, no, I didn't hear anything. And so when I went up there, they had left the picture where it was, and it had fallen off the wall. And it was Velcroed onto the wall, which was pretty crazy, Velcroed in 4 spots and on all 4 corners. And so it had fallen off the wall, and it looked like it had been flung. It flipped through the air and went about 4.5 feet. And so they showed me the video, and we tried for probably about 20 minutes that night to debunk it. And then when Kristy came in the next morning, she tried several different things to try to debunk it as well. And once we saw the video on our computer rather than just on his camera screen, multiple things happened at that point. Mm-hmm. Before it happened, they heard a audible disembodied voice of a female that said help, which is something that's pretty common that we've captured on that floor. And then their REM pod as well as their EDI Plus box started going off. And so thankfully they had the presence of mind to grab their camera whenever they went to open the door and see what was going on. And so they opened the door. You hear Damien say hello. And right after that, the picture just flings off the wall. And so you catch a blip of a shadow over on the right-hand side, like an orb kind of coming down. And then all of a sudden, when the picture comes off the wall, you see this shadow appendage of an arm that comes out, and it looks like it's flinging the picture.
Yeah, so it's really the sequence of events that is so telling, right? So the picture flying off the wall of it in and of itself is incredible. But when you build it up with, as Miranda said, you've got the equipment going off, they capture they capture the disembodied voice. The equipment starts going off. You see a shadow figure zoom across the screen, an orb coming down, the picture flying off the wall as it being propelled by a shadow arm. That whole sequence of events is just an incredible piece of evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, that y'all have it up on the Historic Scott County Jail Facebook page, and then RKB Paranormal. You can look them up, and they've got it on their page as well. But yeah, pretty incredible catch. Like you said, him actually getting up with the camera, and as soon as he opens the door, and yeah, the picture flies off, and it's pretty amazing. And I think Miranda, I think she mentioned that she came and woke you up, Dr. Chris, at like 4 a.m. because she was so excited.
She did. So I actually bought a house that's literally half a mile away from the jail. And so on the nights when Miranda's there, obviously I go home and I go to sleep and all that. And she called me because I think they left around 3 that morning. And so she called me right after they left and said, "I'm coming over." I'm like, "What?" And she said, "You have got to see this." And so, yeah, I staggered to open the door, and she throws this video in my face, and I was like, "Holy smokes!" A little bit, more involved in that.
Yeah.
But what did they just capture? So we watched it again and again on her phone, and then to her point, the next morning, watching it on a laptop was a whole different experience. And so then to see it in slow motion, and again to really capture the sequence of events in slow motion, it's just incredible. Every single one of those sequence, would stand alone as great evidence, but when you compile them up, it's unexplainable.
Yeah.
And I had just recorded their video screen on my phone that night, and I remember sitting there with Kristy, and I was like, you can't. Obviously, you start getting pareidolia when you do it that way. But in a pinch, we were looking at it, and it was like, I swear that looks like an arm.
Yeah.
And so the next day when, and I think both of us, because I went on back to my mom's after I left, I think we were both kind of like, what did we just see?
Yeah.
And it was kind of hard to go to sleep. And so I think it kind of creeped Chris out there. But so she went in and opened, and then when I came in, it wasn't much later than that. Damien sent us the video, and so to just be able to see it on the screen, see it in slow motion, it was really quite an incredible capture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's what this jail does, right? The way I describe it, it's a small jail, but it has a big paranormal punch.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, you kind of, it's funny because when teams come in, I think they're expecting a larger place, right? A little bit bigger building. And so when they first come in, they go into the booking room, which is where we have their base camp, and they have one expression. And then when they leave at the end of the night, their expression is completely different. And then they're very excited to tell us what they got or what they captured or what they experienced. And so that's what's so cool about this, right? You've got all of these people that are really experiencing a lot of what we experience on a daily basis. And for them to be able to capture that and experience it, that's why we do this.
Yeah. And it's just, and what I'm so impressed about is the fact that it is a new location. Mm-hmm. Yes, I did my first investigation there back in 2014 before they did the remodel. And there was a couple teams that came in that the mayor let come in between that time when it closed and then before we took it on. But essentially, we're just sitting, I believe, at 20 teams now that have investigated so far. And the spirits in this location, they want to talk. They want to tell their story. They want to show that, it's not just Waverly and some of these big places that, pack that paranormal punch. Right. They want to show what they can do. And, and I really feel like a lot of it is when we first got the keys, we had the keys for about 2 months because we were cleaning and working in there and getting the museum set up. And really for the first, I would say the first couple of weeks when we were in there, we really spent a lot of time, Dr. Sumner and I, just sitting there, not even so much investigating, but really just telling them what we were going to do and really just trying to, build a relationship, if you will, with that and, just having conversations and such. And I think that really worked really well.
Yeah. And just to follow up on that just briefly, the other interesting thing about this jail is it's not just since it's closed that there's been reports of hauntings. Since the jail was in operation, We have deputies that have come to us and say, I really don't believe in this stuff. But when I was a deputy there, we saw shadow figures. We heard footsteps on the back stairs to the point where we were calling emergency head counts because we thought inmates were escaping, right? We have reports of the elevator running up and down on its own. We had one woman who was a dispatch there. She came in during one of our day tours and said, I was a dispatch here. And I got on the elevator one night by myself and something coughed in my ear. And I never rode the elevator again. And so to have these law enforcement officials, these sworn deputies and dispatch and all of those that work for the county to tell us, we really don't believe in this, but this jail, there is something going on here. That is extremely compelling as well.
Yeah, a former jailer that was chased on the third floor by a shadow figure. Just stories like that, something we hear quite often. And, and then we're getting the paranormal research and the paranormal evidence that backs it up. So it's really quite fascinating. And I just love when the teams come in and when they share with us what they get, because we constantly learn from it every time.
Yeah, we're still going over our evidence because, it was just a few days ago that we were there, but yeah, it is a small location, and people like you were saying, Dr. Sumner, people know Waverly Hills and all that stuff and all these big locations, but it doesn't mean that the small location can't pack a punch. And I think it really did to come in and we had so many personal experiences, and from just the evidence we've gone through so far, we've caught a lot of stuff. I was telling y'all before recording that, we had on video a laser grid that we had set up move, and we heard voices with our own ears. I know that we were recording doing an S's method, and one of our investigators, Caleb, my buddy who invited me out from Yin Yang Paranormal, he was upstairs on the third floor, and we were down in the jailer's quarters, and we were seeing if we could get answers through the S's method from him being up there, and so I was recording, and one of the other gentlemen that were with us said, did y'all hear somebody's breath? Did somebody make that noise? And none of us made that noise, but we caught it on audio. And so it's a disembodied sigh breath. And just a lot of that stuff. And we had really good experience with doing roundtable EVP session. And for anybody that doesn't know, that's when you all ask the same question. You just go around the room and ask a question. You give about 10, 15, 20 seconds in between for the spirits to answer. And we caught a few EVPs through that way too. One of them that is really, really dominant is I asked the question, were you innocent or guilty? And there's definitely a 2-syllable answer afterwards that to me sounds like guilty. Guilty.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we asked, one of the questions we did with the roundtable EVP was we all asked, do you know where we can get some drugs? And after one of the guys, a quick response after he asked, it says yes. So
wow, that's cool.
That's awesome. And that's really, one's fascinating because you are getting these intelligent responses, and two, almost every team is getting something like this. And it's funny because, when you ask the question, are you guilty or innocent? A lot of people are getting responses to that. Miranda and I were doing an investigation just on our own one night, and the ovilist said the word wrong. And I said, were they wrong about you? And we got a male's voice. He said, you girls are going to die. But it was a response to that being wrong question. So just a lot of interesting responses and intelligent responses that we're getting, not just from us, but, from teams such as yourself.
Yeah, and Miranda, you both were telling us a story about what y'all caught on a security camera that you have in the gift shop.
Yeah, and that was probably one of my favorite experiences, and one of the first ones that I had there. And so it was after our first team had wrapped up their investigation. They had left at 3:00, and so we lock certain cells for our daytime tours. And so I had gone up. I was locking the cells up and kind of turning the lights off and cleaning up upstairs. And so after I'd come down, I had gone into the gift shop to pick up some paperwork to take into the booking room. And after I left the booking room, all of a sudden I heard this just deep voiced, very, very rich humming sound. And for a total, it went on for about 6 seconds, which is quite a long time in paranormal time.
Yeah.
But it ended up clearing its throat in the middle of that time and continued humming. And so, of course, that kind of froze me in my tracks right there. And I went about doing what I was doing, came back into the gift shop and was grabbing my stuff to leave for the night. And we have a security camera in there. And so I said something to Chris the next morning, and I said, hey, why don't you go and check and see if we were able to capture that male hum? And so she pulls the camera footage. And so unfortunately, we didn't capture the hum because it was back on the stairs. But you do see on the camera, you see me come back into the room. I'm kind of wringing my hands just a little bit and go over to my bag. And all of a sudden you hear two male voices, and one says, there she is. And the next says, not so loud next time.
Wow.
And I hear something. I didn't hear what it was saying in the moment, but you can tell by the security cam footage that I hear something because I look up at the door. And it's as clear as can be, two male voices, and there was nobody else on the property and definitely no men there. So it was a pretty cool capture.
Yeah, and it's pretty awesome, all the evidence that is already coming out, this incredible evidence that is coming out in just 8 months of y'all being open and operating for teams to come in, and experiences y'all have had too. A lot of places go years without having this much activity.
Yeah. And it was one of those things that was kind of surprising to us. Yeah. When you open a quote unquote haunted location, you do hope that teams get stuff when they come, obviously. But the stuff that teams are telling us and what they're showing us and what we're personally experiencing on a daily basis, it really does blow my mind. It's probably one of the most active locations that I've been in. And again, that's just on a daily basis. I mean, we'll hear footsteps, we'll hear doors closing, we'll walk upstairs to open or, come down to close, and we'll hear audible voices all the time. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's crazy because after you guys had left, I'd gone up there and I had gotten the research item out of one of the rooms we all were investigating. And so when I went up there to get it and I was locking the stuff up, I saw a reflecting back in the box that the container was housed in. And I kind of looked at it and I thought, oh, that's that cardboard cutout of Jesse James that we have on the wall. Well, that doesn't reflect on that wall. And it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, that's actually something standing behind me. And so when I looked a little closer, it was gone. And so the one thing that I was able to pick out from it is it was a male and he had a mustache. And it was just a reflection that was reflecting back in that box. And so it's interesting. I mean, shadow figures, that's something that people see a lot, just recently with the picture on the first floor, we're seeing shadow figures down there. There is the shadow figure that Damien captured there on the second floor. And then, of course, the shadow figure on the third that the jailer was chased off with. And just disembodied voices, very, very intelligent. And they definitely seem to want to let you know that they are aware that you're there. Whatever it was that was standing behind me on the second floor didn't seem to... I don't know if he was just curious or what, but he didn't seem to care that, I did notice him on in his reflection there.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And you mentioned the research project that y'all are doing. Y'all want to talk about that real quick?
Sure, absolutely. So it's kind of interesting. We've never seen anything like this as far as we can tell. But we have a friend of ours who's a detective. He was a detective during the time the jail was in operation. And so what we decided to do is partner with him. And he has an item or items, we don't even know, that is associated with the jail and associated with a murder. So what he did is he put these items inside of a container, and we don't know what they are, so because we want to eliminate all bias. And so when you're a paranormal investigator, if you want to research this item, what you're going to do is you'll come to the jail and you have to sign a disclosure that you won't audio recorded or video recorded, but you can sit with this item and conduct any experiments you want, whether it be dowsing rods, pendulum, tarot cards, EVP session, K2 session or whatever. And then we ask you to write down anything that you hear, see, smell, sense, feel, any of that, and you're going to put it in an envelope. You'll seal the envelope, sign it, date it, and put it in a lockbox that the detective will open at the end of the study. So the idea is that he will open these envelopes, and hopefully the jail has essentially told these teams what's in that box or what it's related to. And so it really does, in our minds, eliminate all bias, because again, the detective is the only person who knows the contents of the item or the container. And so for us, it's kind of interesting. So we're really excited to see what teams are getting, and to be able to, at the conclusion of this study, to hopefully see if the jail has given us any answers.
Yeah, and the fact that it's related to the jail, just makes it even cooler, because it's not like we've, written something down, sealed it in an envelope or something and said, hey, guess what we've done.
Right.
I mean, this is something that it is related to the jail, and, it's unlike anything we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's pretty awesome. How much longer are y'all going to be doing that for teams to investigate that?
It ends May 31st.
And then we will all find out what's in the container and what it, if anybody got any kind of evidence, to what's in there. So.
Mm-hmm. And, obviously we don't want the teams to tell us what they got or anything. The only people that know are those that are on the team, and it's written down on the envelopes. But I can tell you when we've investigated, it's been pretty interesting. So,
yeah. And it's, I do know that when Caleb, and them came in at the end of the night, they did say, because they didn't start doing it until essentially the second half of the investigation there. And the only thing I do know is that he said, things really, when the item was brought into certain rooms, things really kind of lit up a little bit.
Yeah, we've discussed it because I signed the NDA as well. So, and I, unfortunately I had to leave a little bit early because I had like a 3.5 hour drive, but, yeah, they did that afterwards. But yeah, we discussed what they found, and so yeah, I'm curious when the study ends to see what the results are, because I've never seen anything like it either.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. And again, it's something that we're pretty proud of, and it's unique to what we're doing. And it just really solidifies the fact that we are trying to make this a pure paranormal research location. So investigators, whether you're a medium or a team or whatever, you have the opportunity to sit with this item and then, really experience the jail for yourself. Because like I said, it's unlike any other place that I've ever been.
Yeah. And we do say, obviously, it's an option that the teams can do, but if you are not a member of a team and you're just, a solo investigator or just someone who's curious and wants to participate, or if you're a medium or whatever, and you just want to book like an hour to research this item, you can actually call us and we'll set up an hour for you on the schedule, and you can come in and participate in the study as well.
Awesome. I loved being there. I thank y'all so much for having us. We had a blast, and it was definitely active all night, and it's definitely a great location. And I can't wait to come back, in 6 months or so and see what other history y'all have found and that type stuff, because like we were talking about, y'all are still going to dig through newspapers and, all that.
Yeah, right now, that's a long time coming, but it'll be a lot of fun. But no, we will absolutely have you back. You are more than welcome anytime. And we just really appreciate the support of us and of the jail and what we're doing. And, your team is fantastic. Really excited that you were able to capture some stuff while you were there. And
thank you.
Again, we just really appreciate it, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Not a problem.
Yeah.
And anybody that wants to book an investigation, then go on y'all's website, Historic Scott Co Jail. That is cojail.com, and they can go check out the stuff on your Facebook page. You got the Jail Informant podcast every week on Monday, and then also you both still have your own stuff going on with Ghost Biker Explorations with Miranda, and then Dr. Chris. You've got Soul Sisters still going on there.
We do. Yes, we do. So it is one of kind of those interesting dynamics. But, I do have Soul Sisters Paranormal. Miranda has Ghost Biker. And then together we have the Historic Scott County Jail.
Yeah. So we're constantly keeping busy. I would have never thought, if you would have asked me, 5 years ago, that paranormal would essentially be my life and my job. and using a jailhouse toilet every day, I would have kind of laughed and thought, oh yeah, okay. But yeah, it's actually become, essentially a dream come true to be able to, have a business partner that's also your best friend, and to be working in such a unique and wonderful industry of historic preservation, restoration, and then also getting to throw in some paranormal there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Y'all keep doing what you're doing. I love it. And like I said, 6 months or so, I want to come back out and see what all else y'all have gathered up. And if you're a paranormal team, go investigate this place. It is awesome. You will not be disappointed. It is well worth it. And if you just want to go do a flashlight tour, go do that. You can go do a day tour if you like the history, and they would love to have you. And they are awesome hosts. You will love them when you meet them as well.
Well, thank you,
Eric.
Thank y'all for coming on. Appreciate the conversation. I had a good time chatting.
Absolutely.
We did as well. Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, everybody. Y'all stay safe out there. We'll see you next time. Join us next time for a new episode of The Unseen Paranormal. Until then, head over to the Unseen Paranormal Lounge on Facebook for all the latest updates and discussions about the show. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, or at unseenparanormalpodcast.com. And please rate, review, share, and subscribe to help more people discover the show. The Unseen Paranormal Podcast is proud to be the ambassador for paranormal for Verbal.com. A big thank you to my friend Chris Lips for the awesome theme music. You can find more of his music on Apple, Amazon, or Spotify. And as always, thank you for listening.